How's it going, everyone? It's Avi from Weather Sponge 5000, and in this video we're going to talk more about this next major United States snowstorm that's now expected to bring more of the significant impacts towards the Northeast, where some areas of the Northeast could experience over a foot of snow. Now, your big question probably is, could this move further eastward and impact the coastal Northeast cities, such as more populated areas like Boston, New York City, and Philadelphia? And I'll try my best to give that answer in this video. So first, let's take a look at what the European model is stating at the 120-hour mark. So around 5 days out, right around the midday on Monday. And as you can see, we see a heavy amount of snowfall over upstate New York, extending southward into Pennsylvania. And then on the eastern portion, we see very heavy rainfall, as this rainfall could easily cause some flash flooding in some areas of the coastal Northeast if this scenario were to come for fruition, which is still highly uncertain at this time because we're still 5 days out. I will say that this scenario is panning out. I'm fairly certain for what we're seeing right now, because the European model is sort of similar to what the GFS model is stating. So I still do believe that this is the most likely scenario, but we're still 5 days out. We still could see major changes with the computer models, as you just saw in the past 2 days, because just 2 days ago we saw the heaviest snowfall focus more in a lot further westward, closer to Chicago, closer to St. Louis. Now the snow has shifted nearly, I'll say almost 1,000 miles to the east, closer to the interior, or pretty much right over the interior Northeast. So between now and 5 days, if that forecast change happened between 2 days, imagine what could happen between 5 days. Maybe this snow could move further eastward. That's still a possibility. However, I will state that the most likely scenario is that the interior Northeast will experience the heaviest snowfall, while the coastal Northeast, at least as of right now, the most likely scenario is that it'll mainly be a rain event, maybe some snow on the backside, especially if you're closer to the mid-Atlantic cities like New York City and Philadelphia, and maybe even Washington, D.C. Maybe you get some snow on the backside based on a scenario like this. But other than that, I think that the most likely scenario will be that it'll be mostly a rain event for the coastal Northeast cities based on what I've been seeing from the computer models. But here's a look at what the European model is stating. We do see the millibar pressure is quite low at 988 millibars, so you should expect a strong amount of winds and potentially coastal flooding, especially along the southern shore of New England. Look at how large of an area this wind is able to pick up the Atlantic Ocean and push it straight towards the New England coast, which definitely causes some concerns for coastal flooding right over New England and into Long Island, and maybe up the Jersey coast as well. You definitely need to watch out for that possibility. And strong winds, gusty winds, especially if you're right along the coast. I wouldn't be surprised if you do see wind gusts up to 60 miles per hour right up along the coast. And then in the areas further inland, expect maybe gusty winds at around 40 miles per hour, so you should expect that. And who knows, maybe blizzard conditions at times, especially if you're in the higher elevations, as this storm, like I said, will be quite strong at 984 millibars. Now, the thing that will determine if this will be able to move eastward right up along the Northeast coast is this ridge right here. Like I've been talking to you guys about over the past several videos, if this ridge ends up being a little bit stronger, then we should see this low pressure system move northward more quickly, which would mean that the southerly wind will dominate much of the eastern portion of the Northeast, for the snow to be focusing a little bit further westward, where the southerly winds aren't as strong, where the heat energy isn't moving towards, and instead on the western side, that's where you're going to see the stronger northerly flow for the heaviest snowfall to occur in that area. That wouldn't happen on the eastern side with a strong southerly flow pushing that very warm tropical air mass further northward up the Northeast. And that's what we're seeing right here. The European model still expects this ridge to be strong enough for the southerly winds to dominate much of the coastal Northeast. However, I still wouldn't rule out that possibility. This could have a track even further eastward, since that's what's been the trend over the past 48 hours. We like I said, we saw the snow right over the Midwest earlier during the week, but now we see it all the way towards the Northeast. As I'll say that the most likely scenario is that there will be at least some sort of heavy snowfall in the Northeast, especially in the interior Northeast. I'll actually say, in fact, in certain areas of the interior Northeast, a snowstorm is guaranteed at this point. But the question remains where exactly, who else it could impact in the Northeast, I should say. Could this impact Pennsylvania? Could this go further eastward into New Jersey, the New York City area, maybe even Boston and New England? Could get involved with the snowfall. Really all depends on this ridge right here. So we're definitely going to keep monitoring it, as I'll say that we won't really get a definitive answer until maybe the Saturday time frame, once this storm is really organizing itself, once we really get a good feel of how strong this ridge is just off the southeast coast. But I'll certainly keep you guys updated. Now, to backtrack a little bit, so here's how this storm will develop. So we're going to see a Clipper system come off the Pacific Northwest coast, and it's going to bring a decent amount of snowfall right over the northern Midwest. So watch out for maybe around 1 to 3 inches of snowfall right over North Dakota and extending into Minnesota as well. But the more important thing that this Clipper system will bring is a strong northerly flow to enhance the instability right over the midsection of the country, and that'll allow for a lot more convective activity to develop, and as a result, a much stronger low pressure system for our next potential major northeast snowstorm to develop. As you can see, the instability certainly rises at an exponential rate right over the midsection of the country. We see plenty of thunderstorm activity right over the southeast, and soon this thunderstorm activity will transition into snowfall activity along the northern edge where it's most exposed to the cold air. And as the storm system continues to intensify, so will the northerly winds. So the western side of this storm will especially feel the brunt of the snowfall and the heaviest of the snowfall and the highest probability of snowfall in general, thanks to the strong northerly flow bringing that Arctic air further southward. So the big key will remain how where exactly this ridge will be, like I said. So I'll keep you guys updated, but I will say that for portions of upstate New York and portions of northeastern Vermont, expect a pretty significant snowstorm. It's still a bit more uncertain further southward, but I will say that at least some areas, especially in the higher elevations of Pennsylvania and even southern upstate New York, you most likely will experience snow out of this. And then headed into the coastal cities, New York City, Philadelphia, Boston, it's still a little bit too far out to say for certain. I'll still say that it's slightly more likely it'll mostly be a rain event for the coastal Northeast, because I find it hard to believe that we're going to see this ridge weaken enough to the point where the snow can move further westward. But you never know with the computer models. We just saw that the snow was well further to the west and shifted all the way to the east. So maybe if that trend continues, we could see snow from the northeast. But I'll keep you guys updated. I mean, you would see snow for the coastal northeast. Let me specify. The interior northeast will likely see snow. The coastal northeast still uncertain, but I'll keep you guys updated. Now, taking a look at what the GFS model is forecasting. The GFS model is less confident that this snowstorm will be as significant. Let me go to the 18Z run, the latest run of the GFS model. And moving forward, the GFS model does want to strengthen this storm system at a very similar scenario as a European model, and continuing to move forward with the forecast. We do see it does develop. We do see plenty of convective activity develop along this line of cold air that's right behind it. However, we do see the snowfall doesn't really develop until much later in the forecast, when this low pressure system finally approaches the New England area, as we only see some pockets of snowfall, and a large portion of upstate New York in this area is experiencing mostly a rain event. We do eventually see it transition to snow, but it's nowhere near at the snow area is nowhere near as large or as significant as what the European model is forecasting, and that's thanks in part due to the fact that the GFS model doesn't expect this storm to strengthen as much. We do see the millibar pressure does drop down to the 990s, but isn't at the same point at which the European model is at when it comes to strength, because the European model is closer to the 980s. And another thing too is that the GFS model is expecting this storm system to move a little bit northward more quickly. And another thing too is that since this storm is weaker, that means that the northerly flow along the western half of this storm will be weaker, which means that we're less likely to see the cold air be moved far south enough at a powerful enough rate for a lot of this rain to transition into snow, at least early on, because this storm is so weak to pull that, not strong enough to pull that cold air to transition this rain into snowfall along the western half, at least early on. So definitely the strength will play a role in this forecast as well. The stronger it is, by the time this approaches southeast, the more likely we're going to see snowfall on the western half, because that will enhance the northerly flow and the cold air on the western sides. But we do see when it comes to trajectory, it's fairly similar. It's right around the ballpark. It isn't. I wouldn't say that the both of the computer models are at completely different points or at completely different are forecasting completely different scenarios, because that's not the case. They're both right around the ballpark with their forecast, but the GFS model just is expecting less snowfall and a less powerful storm than the European model. We also need to keep in mind that the European model does have a bias of strengthening storms, especially right up along the East Coast during the winter time, a little bit too rapidly. So this might be another one of the European model's bias, but we can't disregard it either at all. It's still just as reliable, if not even more reliable, than what the GFS model is forecasting. So definitely keep those things in mind when making assumptions of what's going to happen in the Northeast, those biases. So we're definitely gonna I'll definitely keep you guys updated over the next several days. But what makes me believe that this forecast between the European and the GFS model is fairly accurate is that they're both taking very similar forecasts. And when we see the forecast scenarios be very similar between the two most reliable computer models, that certainly does raise the certainty and the accuracy of the forecast, even if it's in the more long-term future. So I am leaning a little bit more towards this scenario occurring, where the heaviest snowfall occurs in the interior Northeast, while the coastal Northeast experiences more of a rain event. But again, this forecast is still subject to change, so don't lose hope just yet right up along the Northeast cities. I'll keep you guys updated if we continue to see that trend where the storm system moves further eastward. So if the European model's forecast ends up being the correct one, completely correct, here's a snowfall forecast you should expect from this northeast snowstorm, where we see a large area of 6 to 12 inches for much of Pennsylvania, especially right over central Pennsylvania. And we see a pretty large area where you could expect over a foot of snow over upstate New York, and this could include some of the bigger cities like Syracuse and headed into Rochester as well. You could easily experience close to, if not over a foot of snow, and the Adirondacks, of course, could experience maybe up to 2 feet in the European model scenario. But again, take this with a grain of salt. The forecast is still very uncertain, especially when it comes to the exact amount of snowfall accumulation. For the city of Albany, it's going to be a fairly close forecast, while just to the west of you guys, you could experience close to a foot of snow. Right over Albany, it might be a different scenario, because over Albany, of course, the elevation is lower. It's right around sea level because it's bordering the Hudson River, which is a river still at sea level, but even as far north as Albany. So the temperature will certainly be warmer than the surrounding temperature in the higher elevations of upstate New York. And another thing too is that cities just naturally are warmer than the other areas like the suburbs or the rural areas of upstate New York. So it's going to be a little bit more difficult for the snowfall to accumulate with warmer temperatures that surround or are in Albany. So Albany could experience maybe around 1 to 2 inches of snow in this scenario, but take this with a grain of salt, of course, because the GFS model is showing a fairly different snowfall forecast. Let me go to the 18Z run, which is the latest run of the GFS model. So here's the 18Z run of the GFS. We do see not as significant as the European model, but we still do see heavy snowfall right over the upstate New York area, where you could experience anywhere from 6 to 12 inches of snow. Nowhere near as much as what the European model is forecasting with over a foot of snow, but still a significant snowstorm. Some snowfall for northern Pennsylvania, including the Poconos, right around 3 to 5 to 1 to 3 inches of snowfall you should expect over there. This extends into Albany as well. And as you can clearly see from both of the computer models, none of them want to take accumulating snowfall right up along the northeast coastal cities, and that's the most likely scenario, but don't rule out that possibility it could move further eastward either. So here's my current snowfall forecast for this upcoming northeast snowstorm. So this is pretty much basing my forecast on what the European model is stating. Remember, this forecast is certainly subject to change, but as of right now, you should expect maybe 6 to 12 inches of snowfall right over central Pennsylvania. Southern upstate New York, you could see 6 to 12 inches of snowfall as well. And then for the Adirondacks, you're expected to receive over a foot of snowfall based on what we're seeing right now from the computer models, as it seems like this storm is going to be very powerful, might be powerful enough to bring a strong enough northerly flow for the snowfall to develop, and that could lead to a very significant snowstorm for you guys. But make sure to stay tuned for more updates, because it is certainly subject to change. But that's it for now, guys, and I thank you guys for watching.